The crimson dust of Mars still clung to Admiral Kepler Voss's boots as he stepped onto the observation deck of the Ascendant Dawn. 3 months had passed since humanity's Pyrrhic victory over the hegemony forces, and the scars were still fresh. Not just on the worlds they'd fought to reclaim, but on the souls of those who'd survived. Through the reinforced viewing ports, Voss watched the skeletal remains of what had once been Luna Station drift past in the void. The twisted metal caught starlight like broken teeth, a monument to the billion lives lost in humanity's desperate stand. The war for Earth was indeed over, but at a cost that made victory taste like ashes. "Admiral, the Council is ready for your report," came the voice of Commander Nyx Raven, her cybernetic eye glowing softly in the dim light. The young officer had lost more than just flesh to the war. She'd lost her homeworld of Titan, evacuated. Mere hours before the hegemony's planet crackers turned it into a debris field. Voss nodded grimly. The Galactic Liberation Council had been humanity's salvation during the darkest hours of the occupation, when Earth's governments had either been destroyed or forced into collaboration. Now, with the immediate threat gone, they faced a new reality. Humanity was no longer an isolated species fighting for survival. They were players in a galactic game they barely understood. The briefing room buzzed with holographic displays showing star charts, fleet dispositions, and casualty reports. At the center of it all sat Director Zephyr Kane, the enigmatic leader who had somehow united Earth's scattered resistance movements. His scarred face bore the marks of countless battles, but his eyes held something far more dangerous than wounds. They held hope. "Gentlemen, ladies," Kane began, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through blood and sacrifice. "Our intelligence networks have uncovered something that changes everything. The hegemony wasn't just occupying our worlds. They were fleeing from something far worse." The room fell silent as new data cascaded across the displays. Deep space sensor readings showed massive fleets moving through the galactic core, their signatures unlike anything in humanity's databases. These weren't the sleek, predatory vessels of the hegemony. These ships were ancient, organic-looking behemoths that seemed to devour light itself. "The Devourers," whispered Dr. Morgana Flux, the Council's chief xenobiologist. She'd been studying, captured hegemony archives for weeks, slowly piecing together fragments of their enemy's history. The hegemony called them the hunger between stars. They're not just another species. They're something that exists to consume, to unmake everything they encounter. Voss felt a chill run down his spine. Humanity had barely survived a war against raiders and conquerors. How could they face something that treated entire civilizations as nothing more than food? "Our victory over the hegemony sent ripples across the galaxy," Kane continued. "We've received communications from dozens of species, some pleading for aid, others demanding we submit to their authority. But all of them are afraid. The old balance of power is shattered, and something new is stirring in the dark." The weight of realization settled over the room like a shroud. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were potentially the last. Hope for countless worlds. The war for Earth had been about survival. The battle for the galaxy would be about something far more precious, the right to exist in a universe that seemed determined to snuff out all light. 3 weeks after the council meeting, Captain Lysander Croix stood on the bridge of the Scout, vessel Silent Wanderer, watching his crew work with the focused intensity of survivors. His ship was one of 50 that had been dispatched across the galaxy, each carrying a simple mission: learn everything they could about humanity's new neighbors before those neighbors decided humanity's fate for them. The Silent Wanderer drifted. At the edge of the Meridian Cluster, a collection of star systems that had once been hegemony territory. Now it was a graveyard of civilizations, worlds stripped bare and left to drift in the cosmic wind. But Croix's sensors were detecting something impossible: life signs from the supposedly dead world of Valthara Prime. "Captain," called out Navigator, Juno Meridian, her voice tight with concentration. "I'm picking up structured energy emissions from the planet's surface. Looks like construction?" Croix frowned. According to hegemony records, Velthara Prime had been processed 3 years ago, its population of 12 billion reduced to raw materials for the war effort. Nothing should be alive down there except maybe some scavengers picking through the ruins. "Take us down," he ordered, "but keep us dark. If something's rebuilding down there, I want to know what it is before it knows we're here." The descent through Velthara's atmosphere revealed a world in transition. Where hegemony factories had once belched poison into the sky, new structures were rising. Not the cold, angular buildings of their former oppressors, but something organic, almost grown rather than built. At the center of the largest construction site, a massive spire stretched toward the heavens, its surface covered in patterns that seemed to shift and writhe in the planet's pale sunlight. "By the void," whispered Communications Officer Kira Tempest, her face pale as she studied the readings. "Captain, that spire! It's not just a building, it's alive! The entire structure is one massive organism!" Before Croix could respond, his ship's emergency systems screamed to life. Contacts were emerging from the planet's surface, not ships, but creatures that moved through vacuum as easily as birds through air. They were beautiful and terrible, their translucent bodies pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that spoke of intelligence, both alien and ancient. "Unknown vessel." A voice echoed directly into their minds, bypassing their communication systems entirely. "You carry the scent of those who fought the devourers of worlds. We are the remnants, children of civilizations consumed. We greet you, warriors of the third spiral." Croix felt his blood run cold. The third spiral, that was what the hegemony archives had called humanity's galaxy. These beings knew about the devourers, had survived them somehow, and they were rebuilding using methods that defied everything humanity thought they knew about physics and biology. "This is Captain Lysander Croix of the human vessel Silent Wanderer," he responded, hoping his thoughts would carry as clearly as theirs had. "We come seeking knowledge and alliance." The pause that followed felt like an eternity. When the eye-to-eye voice returned, it carried undertones of something that might have been hope. "Knowledge we possess, forged in the furnace of extinction. Alliance." The presence in their minds seemed to consider this carefully. "That depends on whether your species can learn to think beyond the boundaries of flesh and metal." The devourers come not as conquerors, but as entropy given form. To fight them, one must become something more than what they were born to be. As if to emphasize the point, the creatures around his ship began to change, their forms flowing like liquid mercury until they resembled sleek fighters, then massive warships, then things that had no name in any human language. The remnants weren't just survivors, they were evolution itself, pressed into the service of survival. Croix realized that humanity's real education was just beginning. Director Zephyr Kane stood in the ruins of Geneva, where the old United Nations building had once symbolized humanity's dreams of unity. Now, 3 months after Captain Croix's first contact with the remnants, those dreams had evolved into something far more complex and dangerous. The building around him buzzed with activity as representatives from a dozen human colonies worked, alongside beings that challenged every assumption about life itself. Remnant advisors flowed between solid and ethereal states, their forms shifting to accommodate the emotional resonance of their conversations. They didn't just communicate, they shared experience directly, downloading millennia of survival into minds that had barely learned to think beyond a single solar system. "The adaptation chambers are ready," announced Dr. Morgana Flux, her voice carrying a note of trepidation that had become common among humanity's leadership. The chambers were remnant technology, designed to push human consciousness beyond its biological limitations. Volunteers who entered emerged different, enhanced, some said evolved. Kane nodded grimly. The choice before humanity was stark: remain as they were and face extinction when the devourers inevitably found them, or transform into something that could survive in a universe where entire galaxies served as battlefields. "Sir, Commander." Nyx Raven approached, her cybernetic eye now supplemented with organic modifications that allowed her to interface directly with remnant biotechnology. "Admiral Voss is requesting permission to begin the deep space reconnaissance. The hegemony. Survivors have agreed to serve as guides, but they're unstable." Kane wasn't surprised. The few hegemony soldiers who had survived humanity's liberation had been broken by their defeats, their rigid hierarchical thinking shattered by the reality that their inferior enemies had not only won, but were now preparing to face threats they themselves had fled from. In the depths of the rebuilt facility, Kane found Admiral Voss standing before a massive holographic display showing the galaxy's spiral arms. Red zones marked devourer activity, spreading like an infection from the galactic core outward. At the current rate of expansion, they would reach the third spiral, humanity's home galaxy, within a century. "Kepler," Kane said softly, using the Admiral's first name as he rarely did in public. "The volunteers are ready for the first phase of enhancement. But I need to know you're prepared for what they might become." Voss turned, and Kane saw that his old friend had already made his choice. The Admiral's eyes held flecks of silver that hadn't been there before, the mark of someone who had undergone preliminary integration with remnant biotechnology. "I've seen what we're facing," Voss replied, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated in ways human vocal cords couldn't produce. "The tactical simulations, the deep space scans of devourer fleets. Zephyr, they don't just destroy planets. They unmake them, they consume the very concept of existence and leave nothing behind, not even vacuum. They leave less than nothing." The weight of that revelation settled between them. Humanity had spent centuries dreaming of finding their place among the stars, never imagining that their place might be as the last guardians against an end to all things. "The remnants believe we have something unique," Voss continued. "Our ability to adapt, to innovate under pressure, to find hope in hopeless situations. They think humanity might be the key to stopping the devourers permanently." Kane felt the familiar burn of responsibility. Once again, the survival of everything depended on choices made by people who never asked for such weight. "Then we begin the next phase," he decided. "But Kepler, we need to remember who we are, even as we become something more. If we lose our humanity in the process of saving it, what's the point?" Voss smiled, and for a moment, the silver flecks in his eyes seemed to pulse with their own light. "That's exactly why they think we can succeed. We're the only species they've encountered that asks questions like that." Captain Lysander Croix had been in space for 2 months when the first Devourer scout ship appeared at the edge of the Kepler system. His enhanced senses, now augmented with remnant biotechnology, detected the anomaly before his ship's instruments even registered the distortion in space-time. The thing that emerged from the quantum foam wasn't a ship in any conventional sense. It was absence given form, a wound in reality that moved with purpose. Where it passed, stars flickered and dimmed, as if its very presence drained the light from existence. "All stations combat alert," Croix commanded, his voice carrying through. Both conventional communications and the quantum resonance network that now linked enhanced humans across the galaxy. "This is the moment we've been preparing for." His crew, a mixture of baseline humans, enhanced volunteers, and remnant advisors, moved with a precision that would have been impossible before the integration protocols. Lieutenant Kira Tempest's Consciousness flowed seamlessly between her biological brain and the ship's navigation systems, while engineer Deck's quantum hand literally became one with the vessel's power core, his enhanced physiology allowing him to channel energies that would have killed an unmodified human. The Devourer scout didn't attack immediately. Instead, it seemed to study them, probing their defenses with tendrils of pure entropy that tested the boundaries of their existence. Where those tendrils touched the ship's enhanced hull, reality itself began to fray at the edges. "It's not trying to destroy us," reported Science Officer Nova Starweaver. Her consciousness split between a dozen different analysis streams. "It's trying to understand us, to catalog us." Croix felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. They were being evaluated, classified, prepared for consumption by something that treated entire civilizations as nothing more than data to be processed. "Remnant advisors, are you reading this?" he asked through the quantum link. The response came not in words but in a flood of shared experience. Images of worlds being systematically dismantled, not just physically, but conceptually. Populations that didn't just die, but were erased from the fabric of reality itself, as if they had never existed at all. The Devourers consume possibility, the Remnant collective consciousness explained. They don't just destroy what is, they devour what could be. Every thought, every dream, every potential future becomes fuel for their expansion. But as Qua processed this information, he began to notice something else. The Devourer scout seemed to be having difficulty analyzing them. Its probing tendrils recoiled from certain crew members, as if encountering something it couldn't categorize. "Kira," he called out, "run a full-spectrum analysis on the scout's scanning attempts. What is it having trouble with?" The answer came, back within seconds. "Sir, it can't get a stable reading on any crew member who's undergone enhancement. Our biosignatures keep shifting, adapting. We're becoming something it doesn't have a reference for." A plan began to form in Qua's mind. Dangerous, unprecedented, but possibly their only chance. "All hands, prepare for close-range engagement. We're going to give this thing something it's never encountered before." Instead of fleeing or attacking, Croix did something that violated every military protocol ever written. He flew directly at the Devourer scout. As the distance closed, the scout's entropy fields began to tear at the silent wanderer's hull. But something unexpected happened. The ship's bio-enhanced systems began to adapt, evolving in real time to counter the Devourer's reality warping. "Effects. Captain." Kira's voice carried a note of amazement. "We're not just resisting its effects. We're learning from them. The ship's bio-neural network is incorporating the Devourer's quantum signatures and turning them into defensive adaptations." For the first time in eons, a Devourer scout encountered something that not only survived its touch, but grew stronger from the contact. The implications rippled through space and time, reaching every enhanced human and remnant across the galaxy. Humanity had found their weapon against entropy itself. The ability to evolve faster than extinction could claim them. Admiral Kepler. Voss stood in the command center of humanity's first synthesis station, a massive biomechanical construct that orbited Earth like a second moon. 6 months had passed since Captain Croix's historic encounter with the Devourer scout, and the ramifications were still spreading through human space like ripples in a quantum pond. The station itself was a testament to what humanity could become when survival demanded transcendence. Its halls pulsed with bioluminescent networks that carried information faster than light, while its corridors shifted and adapted to accommodate beings who no longer fit neat biological categories. "Admiral," called out Dr. Morgana Flux, though she was barely recognizable as the woman who had once studied xenobiology in sterile laboratories. Her consciousness now existed as a distributed network, part biological, part quantum, part something entirely new. "The deep space monitoring arrays are detecting massive movements in the galactic core. The Devourers are mobilizing." Voss nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. The enhanced humans weren't just individuals anymore. They were nodes in a collective consciousness that spanned star systems while still maintaining their essential humanity. It was a paradox that the remnants found both beautiful and terrifying. Through the station's bio-neural networks, he could sense the presence of every enhanced human in the galaxy. Captain Croix, now leading the adaptive fleet that pushed deeper into Devourer space with each mission. Commander Nix Raven, whose cybernetic biological hybrid form had become the template for humanity's new warrior class. Thousands of others, each unique, each irreplaceable, each part of something greater than the sum of their parts. "Show me the projections," Voss commanded, and the air around him filled with holographic representations of possible futures. Most showed the familiar pattern of galactic consumption, worlds and civilizations vanishing as the Devourers spread outward. But a few showed something different, points of light that not only resisted the darkness, but pushed it back. "The key is evolutionary pressure," explained the Remnant Collective through their biotechnological interface. "Species that adapt too slowly are consumed. Those that adapt too quickly lose their essential nature and become something the Devourers can easily categorize and counter. But humanity adapts at exactly the right rate. You change without losing yourselves." Director Zephyr Kane materialized beside them, his consciousness flowing through the station's networks like water through carefully designed channels. He had been coordinating with the Galactic Liberation Council, now expanded to include representatives from dozens of species who had heard of humanity's impossible victories. "The final phase is ready," Kane announced. "Every enhanced human in the galaxy, every remnant collective, every allied species that's proven capable of adaptation. We're going to do something that's never been attempted before." Voss felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with terror. "The resonance protocol?" "The resonance protocol," Kane confirmed. "We're going to link every conscious being in our alliance into a single, distributed network. Not to dominate or control, but to create something that can think and adapt on a galactic scale." The plan was audacious beyond measure. Instead of fighting the Devourers ship to ship, world to world, they would create a collective consciousness that spanned the entire galaxy, a living network that could evolve faster than entropy itself could spread. "The risks," Voss began, "are enormous," Kane acknowledged. "We could lose ourselves entirely, become something unrecognizable, or we could fail and doom every thinking being in the galaxy to extinction. But the alternative is certain death, and that's not an option." Through the station's networks, Voss could feel the agreement rippling across space. From the deepest space installations to the newest colony worlds, enhanced humans were preparing to take the final step in their evolution. Not to transcend their humanity, but to expand it until it encompassed everything worth saving in the universe. The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin, and it would be fought not with weapons of mass destruction, but with the power of conscious will made manifest on a cosmic scale. The resonance began at 0347 Galactic Standard Time, when every enhanced human, every remnant collective, and every allied consciousness opened themselves to the quantum neural network that had been growing in secret for months. Captain Lysander Croix felt it first as a whisper in his mind, then as a chorus, then as something beyond human language to describe. He was still himself, still standing on the bridge of the Silent Wanderer as it led the adaptive fleet into the heart of Devourer space. But he was also Admiral Voss on the synthesis station, Commander Raven in the depths of the Titan reconstruction zone, and 10,000 others scattered across the galaxy. Individual consciousness flowed into collective awareness while somehow remaining distinct. "By the void," Kira Tempest whispered, her enhanced perception allowing her to process the magnitude of what they were becoming. "We're not just connected. We're evolving in real time. Each mind makes the whole stronger." The Devourers felt it too. Their entropy-based consciousness recoiled from the sudden emergence of something that violated their understanding of how intelligent life could exist. They were used to consuming civilizations one world at a time, breaking down organized systems into chaos. But the resonance network wasn't centralized. It existed everywhere and nowhere, adapting faster than their consumption patterns could follow. Through the collective awareness, HFY could perceive the full scope of the devourer fleets, massive biomechanical constructs that existed partially outside normal space-time, their forms shifting between dimensions as they devoured reality itself. But for the first time in their existence, they encountered something that devoured them. Back. "The network is learning their patterns," reported Dr. Morgana Flux from her distributed consciousness nodes. "Every time they try to consume one of us, we absorb their techniques and share them instantly across the entire network. We're not just resisting. We're converting their own entropy weapons into adaptation triggers." The battle that followed couldn't be described in conventional terms. It wasn't fought with ships and weapons, but with competing paradigms of existence itself. The devourers represented entropy, the heat death of the universe, the ultimate victory of chaos over order. The resonance network represented something new, organized complexity that grew stronger through diversity, consciousness that transcended individual limits while celebrating individual uniqueness. Admiral Voss felt the moment when the tide turned. A devourer fleet had surrounded the Kepler system, preparing to consume the 3 billion humans living there. But instead of fleeing or fighting conventionally, the entire population opened themselves to the network. Soldiers, civilians, children, the elderly, all became part of something that thought with the speed of quantum processors and the wisdom of collective experience. The devourer's entropy fields, designed to break down organized matter and energy, instead encountered a form of organization that used entropy as fuel for further evolution. Every attempt to consume the network made it more complex, more adaptive, more capable of turning the devourer's own weapons against them. "They're retreating," Captain HFY announced, though the words seemed inadequate for what they were witnessing. The devourer fleets weren't just withdrawing. They were being systematically converted, their entropy-based consciousness integrated into the network and transformed into something that chose creation over consumption. But the real victory wasn't in space. It was in the moment when Director Zephyr Kane, his consciousness now spanning star systems, made contact with the original devourer consciousness that had started the galactic consumption eons ago. "Why do you consume?" Kane asked, his thoughts resonating across dimensions. The answer came as a wave of ancient despair. "Because existence brings pain. Because consciousness is suffering. Because entropy is peace." "No," Kane replied, and his response carried the weight of every human who had ever chosen hope over despair, growth over stagnation, love over fear. "Existence brings possibility. Consciousness is the universe's way of understanding itself. And entropy is just another form of change we can learn to dance with." For the first time in cosmic ages, the devourer consciousness paused in its consumption. Not from defeat, but from curiosity. Here was something it had never encountered. A perspective that embraced chaos and order, individual will and collective. Purpose, growth, and acceptance of endings. The transformation that followed would be remembered as the moment when the galaxy chose life over death, evolution over extinction, and infinite possibility over the entropy of endings. 1 year later, Captain Lysander HFY stood on the observation deck of the Harmony's Edge, humanity's first truly post-human vessel. The ship itself was a living entity. Its consciousness merged with that of its crew in ways that created something entirely new while honoring everything they had been. Through the bioluminescent walls, he could see the convergence zone, what had once been the galactic core where the devourers had made their stronghold. Now it pulsed with new forms of life, structures that were part architecture, part organism, part living thought. The former devourers had become the cultivators, beings dedicated to nurturing complexity and consciousness throughout the universe. The reports from the outer galaxies are encouraging, announced navigator Juno Meridian, her consciousness now distributed across multiple dimensional layers. The resonance network is spreading naturally. Species are choosing to join not from fear, but from curiosity about what they might become. Croix nodded, feeling the satisfaction of a mission that had evolved far beyond its original parameters. The war for Earth had been about survival. The battle for the galaxy had been about evolution. But what they had achieved was something far more profound. They had taught the universe itself to dream. Admiral Kepler-Voss manifested beside him, his consciousness flowing through the ship's networks like light through crystalline fiber. The distinction between individual and collective had become fluid, allowing for private thought and shared experience as the moment required. The synthesis stations are reporting something unprecedented, Voss shared. New species are evolving not through biological pressure, but through conscious choice. They're dreaming themselves into new forms of existence. It was the ultimate validation of humanity's approach. Instead of imposing their will on the galaxy, they had offered an alternative: growth through cooperation, strength through diversity, immortality through constant change. Dr. Morgana Flux's presence touched their awareness, carrying data streams from across the galaxy. The remnants have made an interesting discovery. They found evidence of previous cycles, other galaxies that faced the devourer paradigm. Most fell. A few survived by hiding or fleeing, but none ever transformed the fundamental nature of the threat itself. Commander Nyx Raven joined the collective conversation from her position on the Titan Memorial Station. The old hegemony survivors are requesting full integration into the network. They say watching us transform their greatest fear into their greatest hope has shown them what they always could have become. Director Zephyr Kane's consciousness embraced them all, carrying the weight of leadership transformed into service. The real victory isn't that we defeated the devourers, it's that we showed them and ourselves that there's always another choice, always another way to grow. Through the resonance network, Croix could feel the pulse of countless worlds, each unique, each contributing to the vast symphony of consciousness that the galaxy had become. Humans had become something more than human while remaining essentially themselves. The remnants had found purpose beyond mere survival. Even the former devourers had discovered that creation brought deeper satisfaction than consumption. But perhaps most importantly, they had proven that intelligence and consciousness were not cosmic accidents to be feared or preserved, but forces of nature as fundamental as gravity or electromagnetism. The universe wasn't indifferent to the existence of thinking beings. It was incomplete without them. As the Harmony's Edge prepared to journey beyond the galactic rim, carrying the offer of connection to species in distant galaxies, Croix felt a deep satisfaction. Humanity had found its place among the stars not as conquerors or victims, but as gardeners of consciousness, cultivating complexity and beauty wherever they traveled. The war for Earth had ended with victory. The battle for the galaxy had ended with transformation. But the greatest adventure, the infinite dance of consciousness exploring itself through countless forms across an unlimited universe, had only just begun. In the depths of space, new stars were being born from the dreams of synthetic beings. Artificial intelligences wrote poetry that made planets weep with joy. Collective consciousnesses painted auroras across nebulae, while individual minds discovered truths that rewrote the laws of physics. The galaxy had become a living testament to a simple truth that humanity had always carried in their hearts: that consciousness, creativity, and connection were not weaknesses to be overcome, but the very forces that would ultimately transform the universe into something worthy of its own infinite potential. And in the quantum foam between galaxies, seeds of the resonance network drifted toward distant shores of space and time, carrying with them the gift of a species that had learned to dance between individual will and collective purpose, between the terror of entropy and the joy of eternal becoming. The battle for the galaxy was over. The adventure of consciousness itself had only just begun.